I can't be that weak that I can't break a glass pane of window with a huge rock, and I crack it again. Nothing happens. I don't even chip the glass. So I set the rock down, and I remember legitimately just looking up, and I said, if you have a better plan, I'm all for it. And I put my hand on the window, and it swings open.
Oh, my Lord.
Goes into, well, he's mine too. Don't get all
I would say so. Yeah. This is Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I am your host, Trapper Jack. One of our main themes here is that everything God was doing 2,000 years ago and before, He is still doing today. Miraculous healings, encounters with angels, divine intervention. In fact, our guest today has experienced all three. Radio host Dave Schrader joins us today here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. If you'd like to be a guest, let me know what your story is. Just go to touchedbyheaven.net and give me a little brief description of what happened at touchedbyheaven.net. I love hearing the encounter stories. I love it. I love it when, I don't care if it's a big story or a small story, how God says, yo, I'm right here. See me? See, shooting off the flare gun. Do you see me? Do you see me? In fact, tomorrow night I'm speaking at a local church here. I'm posting this on Tuesday, September 4th, and on September 5th at 7 o'clock, St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church in Medina, Ohio. So if you're in the Cleveland area, it's a freebie. Starts at 7 o'clock, and I think I think you're going to find it very entertaining. But it's interesting how I got there. If I were to say whose idea was it, because my contact there is a woman by the name of Jennifer Webb. Hi, Jennifer. I just gave her a shock. Jennifer, a couple of years back, she gets in the mail, actually her son gets in the mail, a white cane from the National Federation for the Blind. He doesn't need a white cane, but he gets a white cane, and they're looking at this going, no, nothing. Just a white cane arrives in the mail, and they're going, what is this? That night, Jennifer, one of her Facebook friends, sends her a note that says, hey, there's a podcast you might like to listen to. It's called Blind Faith Live, Real People, Real Miracles. And the host is Trapper Jack, who's legally blind. Now Jennifer's not going to connect all that together at that time, but now she can look back and go, oh, it's just God saying hi. So whose idea was it that I speak at the church? And that it would intersect at a time where this has become my purpose, is to go into churches, organizations, events, whatever, and just talk about what God is doing in the world. I'm just telling stories. That's all I'm doing. I'm not wasting my breath with trying to convince anybody of anything, because God's speak is so loud. He speaks in the miraculous. You just tell the stories, and it does it, all by itself. So whose idea was it? The timing is perfect. The intersection of when it happens. It's great. And of course, Jesus is always inviting us into an encounter. He invites us. As a matter of fact, the song that's been playing so much in my head, and, music bubbles up in my head. And this one song it's literally been there all year. It's about the encounter. It's about how Jesus invites us into an encounter. And the song is Sailing by Christopher Cross. And in the song, as we spiritualize the lyrics, Jesus plays the role of the sail, the canvas, because you can be on a sailboat, you have 100-mile-an-hour wind, but you're going nowhere unless you have the sail up, right? So Jesus is the sail. And if you kind of picture the most perfect of perfect days, where the water is like glass and just a gentle breeze and all that, and we're invited to step onto the sailboat of Jesus. And if we're with Jesus, we're experiencing heaven, right? You have Jesus in your life, and in that moment, in that encounter, you're experiencing heaven, right? A little bit of paradise. And after all, it's not that far from paradise. At least it's not for me. For when the wind's just right and we sail away, we sail to tranquility. For the canvas, Jesus can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me, it's not that far from Never Never Land. No reason to pretend, for when the wind's just right, we find the joy of innocence again. For the canvas, Jesus can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. Jesus is always about the miraculous. Jesus never stopped healing people. Jesus never stopped sending his angels. Jesus never stopped divine interventions. We just stopped talking about what Jesus is doing today, which is what we do here. How Jesus is always out there shooting that flare gun, trying to get our attention with the miraculous, trying to get our attention. The miraculous wakes us up and always points us towards Jesus. And if we want to fill up the pews again, or keep people in the pews, as well as bring people back, we need to be sharing our stories, our encounters, our miraculous moments, our divine interventions, our encounters with angels. We shouldn't be afraid to share with one another what's going on. If we actually brought all that back into the churches, the churches would grow, the populations would grow, as they are in South America and India and Africa and the Philippines, where Christianity is still growing. It's still growing, unlike the U.S. and in Europe. They are embracing the miraculous, and that's what keeps people in the pews, and that's what brings people back, that excitement. It's the excitement of the early church from 2,000 years ago. Our job is to recreate that just by doing what they did, and that is talking about what God is doing right here, right now. Make it real, just make it real. Because if we do, like the song says, it's not that far back to sanity. At least it's not for me. For when the wind's just right, we sail away and find serenity. Oh, the canvas, Jesus, can do miracles. Just you wait and see. Believe me. Believe me. So there you go. There's that song. Believing in the miraculous. We're going to talk to Dave Schrader from Midnight in the Desert.
Our guest this evening, Trapper Jack, he is here with us to talk about everyday encounters with miracles, angels, near-death experiences, global events, and more that seem to be orchestrated by a higher power. Trapper Jack, welcome to Midnight in the Desert.
Dave Schrader's an amazing radio host. He has a number of internet shows. I'm on his show, Midnight in the Desert, a subscription show right here. But he at one time was a permanent fill-in host for the program Coast to Coast, and all night. It's a huge show, all night Coast to Coast, which is still on the air now, and it's an amazingly successful, good show for the night owl crowd and everything, right? So Dave is a very accomplished interviewer. He's a great radio host, and he has had experiences, some big-time experiences. He will now share stories about a miraculous healing. It's a good one. He's involved in it. Let's see. I think there's an angel in it, and also divine intervention, because by any account, when you hear this story, there's no way Dave should be alive. There's absolutely no way Dave should be alive without God's hand saying, nope, not yet. Not yet, not for Dave. He has not yet fulfilled his purpose, and his life was saved, as you'll hear in this episode. Here on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God, Midnight in the Desert with Dave Schrader. Let's get underway.
Talk to me about what got you into this aspect of talk and investigation and research to really kind of get into miraculous claims and mysteries. What drew your attention into that aspect?
Yeah, because this, I didn't know this world existed. I'll be honest with you. I had left the church when I was 19, 20 years old, and I was gone because, the God stuff, he was vague and distant and disconnected, and I didn't get it. In fact, all 7 of us kids left, and we were all Catholics, and we all just left. It was interesting. And then about 15 years later, I meet my future wife. She drags me back into the church, and I still think it's boring and vague and all that. Then about 15 years later, there's a local physician here in Cleveland named Dr. Isam Nami. He's had some national attention. Anyway, so I meet this guy. I'm legally blind, so I go to him to maybe he can help me with my vision, because I hear he does miracle stuff, right? So I go, and I get a lot of interesting things happening to me, but in the process of going to his office, I am meeting people who had 40 years of migraines and they're gone, and they had cancer and it was gone, and I'm literally watching people get prayed over and bones are moving and all that. And so in that process, it's like something is going on here. And I'm going to kind of skip a little bit. I'll go back to that, but to skip ahead, I have seen just hundreds and hundreds of miraculous things happen, which led me to want to read about global miraculous things that have happened. And so it's kind of taken over. It just totally seduced me, this guy who thought all this was just out there a million miles away. And suddenly I'm having my own experiences, and I'm seeing other experiences. And it's just, I got seduced, Dave. I don't know how else to put it. And not unlike you, it's, with the early radio background and all that, but like you, it's like I wanted to talk to people who had the experiences. So I started a podcast 5 years ago called Blind Faith Live, and I've got hundreds of miracle stories, people coming forward telling me their stories. And I talk on a weekly episode with this Dr. Isam Nami about his insights. What is it about his prayers that are answered like nobody else's I've ever seen or even read about for a couple of thousand years? I mean, there certainly have been saints along the way, and we hear about miraculous stories, but just it's every day with this guy. There's nothing random about it. And so I talked to him, and I talked to these people who had miracles. And then this year, I kind of extended beyond that to divine intervention in other ways, near-death experiences, and some of those are just dazzling. The God aspect to them all. And then things like angel encounters, those kinds of things are like happening every day. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that until, like you do the interviews and you find out things.
There are aspects I've come to just accept and believe that there is something really interesting going on. Like many, we're all seeking that miracle. We want to see something magical. And I think some of the reason we miss it is because we're looking for Hollywood's version of a miracle, right? We want to see the lightning bolt that brings somebody back to life. We want to see the scales fall from the eyes and allow the blind to see or the crippled to walk again. And sometimes it's not quite that profound, but remarkable things can happen. But I've had two experiences in my life that I would put in the category of miracle. And it was just a strange series of events that happened to me. And I look back at those moments and I think, this is something really unique. And I remember having that moment, having that thought at the moment, but it sounds so strange, but it became just kind of like part of who I was instead of the standout moment for me until years later when I re-examined just exactly what happened. And I wish it was something really profound, but my one example was I'd come home. It was very cold out. I had a friend of mine and my newborn son and his newborn son, and we were locked out of the house, locked out of my car because I'd left the stupid keys in the car. And I had a brand new puppy that we had just bought. And my wife isn't due home for a while. Nobody's got cell phones at this time. And I go around and I'm like, all right, here, you watch the kid. I guess I'm going to go break the garage window, climb in, and I'll get us into the house. And I go walking around the back and my stomach's hurting. I'm not a handyman. I know busting this window means it's going to be like this forever. I'm just, I've accepted my weaknesses. So I reach down and I grab one of the kind of stepping stones in our backyard, and I haul it up over my head and I look at this window and I'm like, I hate that I have to do this. And I hit the window and the window just shakes. So I reel back and I hit it again and the window shakes. And I thought, well, what the hell is going on here? I can't be that weak that I can't break a glass pane of window with a huge rock, and I crack it again. Nothing happens. I don't even chip the glass. So I set the rock down, and I remember legitimately just looking up, and I said, if you have a better plan, I'm all for it. And I put my hand on the window, and it swings open.
Oh, my Lord.
Goes into, well, he's mine too. Don't get all
I would say so. Yeah.
So I kind of shake it off, and I'm like, all right, I crawl in. And now I figured, well, what I probably did by hitting it is I shook loose the framing and probably broke the latch. But I get into the house. I let everybody in. I go back down to check, and the window's shut and the latch is sealed. And I go back outside from the door and I can't push it open again. And I'm like, all right, that's weird. But it's so cold out. Maybe it just froze back in place. I shook it loose. That's got to be what it is. I go upstairs. The puppy's looking for a place to go to the bathroom. I put him out on my deck and go back to change my son's diaper when I suddenly hear this horrific squealing coming from the dog. And I finish up with the baby, run out to the door. The dog has fallen off a 2-story deck onto a concrete slab and is bent like a C backwards. And it's just yelping and crying. I run down, grab it in a towel, swaddle it, and I'm hauling ass to the emergency vet. And we'd called them. They said, we've got 2 people in, come in quickly before we close for the night. I've got this dog in my lap wrapped in a towel. It's howling and screeching. And all I could do was think. I just started to pray, and I'm like, this is horrific. This poor puppy, we just bought this dog. It was very expensive. I really don't have another $1 million to sink into fixing this dog, but I don't want it to sit here suffering either. God, do your work. Either take it or heal it, but you can't let this happen. Don't let this poor dog suffer. And as I'm praying this out loud, the dog just goes limp in my arms, and that was it. No sound. I pull up in front of the emergency room, walk into the door, set the towel on the counter, and the doctors come out and they all kind of hang their head. The lady at the front counter, the guy at the counter, and obviously we have bad news. He unfolds the the towel, and the dog stands up. And they all kind of look at it and they're, oh, okay. And he said, well, let's take him back and examine him. And he lifts the dog very gingerly, no whelping, no whining, nothing. Takes the dog in the back. I start chatting with the lady at the front counter. I'm like, man, this is going to be rough. This was expensive. This was kind of our family Christmas gift. I hope this isn't going to break the bank with what they're doing. And she's like, nah, don't worry about it. It's emergency. It's going to, it's pricey, but I'm sure we can work out payment arrangement or whatever. She goes back in the back, comes back out. They come out with my dog. He goes, we've done x-rays on this dog. We've touched this dog and massaged it, trying to find the sore spot. There's nothing wrong with your dog. And I'm like, well, how is that? And he goes, well, my assistant said you prayed over this dog the entire ride here. I said, yeah. He goes, well, somebody was listening. You got your Christmas miracle. And I'm like, wow. All right. Well, what do I owe you for the work you've done in the x-rays? And he said, you know what? I can't take ownership for what cured your dog or helped your dog. So I really kind of feel bad charging you at all. So just consider this an all around miracle night and have a good night. And what's your dog's name? And I said, I haven't even named it yet. And he goes, well, I think Lucky might be a good name. And that is exactly what we ended up with. And he said after a 2-story fall onto concrete, this dog should not have survived or been in any kind of condition that it was in. But to me, that was I kind of went back and it was weird. I had this kind of emotional feel and sense on the way back home. And then all of a sudden it was gone. It was just like, like I'd gone out grocery shopping that day. All of the magic of it had kind of been absorbed, if that makes sense. And it felt strange that I had this kind of disconnect from an experience that I can only really describe as kind of a series of miracles that took place. Do you hear that often where once it happens, and I didn't mean it in a disrespectful sense, but it didn't stand out so magically to me. It just felt like this is the way it's supposed to be.
I think, yes. And first, that's a great story, my Lord. Yours too, I'm sorry. But all of ours. Yes, I have heard that before. And I think what you were saying is anytime something like that happens, there's just this giant relief. And I find miracles are often, especially healing miracles, are just a relief. It's gone, and then you go on with your day. The pain's gone, and then you go on with your day. The dog's fine, and then you go on with your day. There's just this relief. And you would have been in agony had that dog stayed in agony, And I think you're asking about how miracles happen and how the reaction to them and all that. I think you just perfectly put what happens in the world. We see something, and throughout your story was, maybe not. We're not seeing God's flare gun just yet. Maybe. Right. You know what I mean? He's shooting off the flare gun. He's saying, do you see me there? Do you see me there? Do you see me there? How about the window? Do you see me there? Brick? Do you see me? Dog? Do you see me there? I think he's shooting off that flare gun every day. Sometimes globally, sometimes individually, but that's what I do. I talk to people who these things are happening to, and it's flare gun stuff. And along the way, there is always that, well, maybe that just happened. Maybe that dog was just bent the wrong way and you just held it right and it snapped the other way and now it's all good again without seeing the flare gun. I think you embodied right there what happens with people in general when it comes to these kinds of things, that we're kind of skeptical, and then we go, oh, thank you, Jesus, or thank you, God, or whatever, and then we're relieved, and then we go on with our day. Perfectly put.
Right, but you would feel like there, I don't know, and it's just my opinion, you would think that there would be this sense of kind of magic surrounding you for a long time, a glow, right, after having something like that occur, but it became so everyday moment to me that kind of stood out. And like I said, as I've gotten older and re-examined some of these things that have happened in my life, I'm baffled by how did that happen? How am I not dead? How did this, what intervened in my being? And again, I'm always looking for a logical explanation. It was just timing. It was apparently I didn't know how this worked or how that worked. And this happened, but it becomes this weird kind of mundane sense. And I've talked to some people that have had that happen as well. And they talk about it so matter-of-factly. And that's strange, right? Because to you and anybody else listening, that's kind of a holy poop moment, right?
It is absolutely. I mean, okay, but look, you're still telling that story. There is a part of you, and I have no idea what your faith is and all that. I've listened to a little bit of you, on your show and everything, but I haven't listened to that, if you've expressed a lot of that or not. But there is a part of you that keeps going back to that. And what I find with people is that when you look back on your life and you look about how you met a certain person at a certain time, or the dog thing, or whatever, or My birth announcement is a baby holding a microphone saying a new voice is on the air. I mean, is that God's sense of humor or what? So
Right.
I think if you look back on your life, you see these moments, if you're not blinded by it, if you don't have blinders on, those things that you said were, wow, what a lucky coincidence. That's why some people call them God incidences, because for just that reason. On my Touched by Heaven podcast, very first episode I did, I interviewed a guy named Dave Jackson. He's a fellow podcaster. And he told me the story, and you're talking about windows and things that made me think of this, is that he was in college, and he's dropping off his girlfriend at her apartment complex. He's pulling into the parking spot, but there's a guy on the driver's side in the parking space next to him. And he's just standing there, and he's kind of got some kind of hooded jacket on and everything, so you can't really see him very well. And his girlfriend's about to get out of the car, and the guy standing there says, "You need to get out of the car." And he said, "No, I'm good, thanks. You need to get out of the car." In other words, this guy wants Dave's car, is what he wants. So right. Dave says to his girlfriend, he says, "Don't get out. We're both leaving." And he starts backing up. And he has to kind of back up and kind of do a T and then pull out. So when in the T position, this guy is standing there, and he's only 6 feet away from him. He's only 6 feet away, and he pulls out a gun. And he shoots the gun. And the bullet, based on the nick in the window and the smudge on the window, is right at Dave's head. It hits the window. He's 6 feet away, like a brick, only a really fast one. Should go through the window and through Dave's head. Instead, it hits the window, ricochets, basically bounces off the window, goes kind of sideways, and puts a hole in his metal door. And so he just peels out of there. Now, he's looking for a cop at this point. So he finds a cop, and he doesn't realize Dave doesn't realize what's happened yet. He finds a cop. He says, "Do you see anything on the side of my car? Because I don't know if a guy threw a brick or what he did." And he said, "Roll your window back up." He rolled his window back up, and he's kind of like pointing at the window. And he says, "Get out, roll down your window." He says, "Look at that." He says, "See that black smudge?" He says, "That's a bullet. The bullet hit there, ricocheted, and somehow went through your door." So he goes to his physics teacher. Dave goes to his college physics teacher. And he says, "Explain this to me. Bullet speed, window thickness, angle, a whole thing, 6 feet away, head, a whole thing." And he says, "Explain this to me, how that bullet bounces off the window and goes through my metal door." And the physics teacher says, "Oh, that's easy." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And he says, "Somebody upstairs likes you." I mean, that's the only explanation, because it just defied logic. But here's where I connect it. And here's what I do after watching this enough and knowing enough about the Bible. My point is, in this God shooting off a flare gun thing, and this is what we're missing, and this is what I think the churches are missing, by the way, and why people are leaving. What we're missing is that everything that we've read about in the Bible a million times, things like miracle healings, things like angels doing things, and things like divine intervention where an apostle is stoned but then gets up and walks away. They couldn't kill him. They should have been able to kill him. They didn't die because they hadn't fulfilled God's purpose yet. And they were certainly following God, and they had not yet fulfilled the purpose. Same is true for Dave. Whatever that purpose is, it wasn't time yet. And God saved him. I fully believe that. And I think those kinds of things where people don't die, and by golly, they should, there's a reason for that. And there are still angels doing things, and there are miracle healings. And people, when they care so much, even about a beautiful little dog, Dave, your love saved that dog. It boils down to love. Everything boils down to love. And your love saved that dog. The doctor was right. You were praying, and God said, okay. The question is then, well, why doesn't he say yes all the time? Well, we should see enough yeses in the world. We should see enough that it doesn't have to happen every time. Here's the part people forget. Everybody Jesus healed died. They all died. So what was the point? The point was the miraculous gets our attention, as it did with the window, as it did with the dog. The miraculous gets our attention, so we go, was that you? Was that? And you see enough of those, was that you? That you finally go, oh, that is you. And then you start a relationship, and then they happen all the time. I get them all the time now. They happen all the time. And people who recognize it, are open to it, they see it all the time now. They see the flare gun going off all the time.
We need to take a break. We'll come back and continue our conversation with Trapper Jack. And
in this interview with Dave Schrader, I started talking about the music that plays in my head.
And I would look at the lyrics. I would always have to look up the lyrics. And we don't look at the lyrics for just what they were for that song. We spiritualized them. I would spiritualize the lyrics. Okay, who's saying this to whom? Okay, this is God saying this to me. This is an angel saying this to me. This is me saying this to Mary. And in each lyric, my job, if you will, in the podcast was to figure out what the lyrics meant spiritually, because it was going to tie in with that week's episode and the theme of that episode. And those songs continued up until I finished the podcast over 4 years later, every week, a different song, a different song. I still get them. Interestingly, the one that's playing right now, Phil Collins' song called Against All Odds, spiritualizing the lyrics. The lyrics of that song, a guy's lost his girl, and against all odds, he's waiting for her to come back. He knows she's not going to come back. He knows. But against all odds, he waits. Turn around and see me cry. Look at the space that you used to be in and all that. Okay, so I got that song started playing weeks ago, and it's still playing. It kind of changes off with other ones, but I look at that and I go, okay, in my case, what does this mean to me? Spiritualizing it. What are we talking about? Well, this is God. Sorry, I'm going to do a God thing here, Dave. Look out, here it comes. This is God saying, where'd everybody go? Because people are leaving the churches in droves. In the Catholic Church, it's 6 leave for every one that comes in. And here's God saying, against all odds, I'm waiting for you to come back. Against all odds. And there are places where the church is growing. South America, India, Africa, over 50% Christian now, Philippines. In America and Europe, it's dying. Why? What's the difference? What I'm talking about tonight, those churches embrace. They embrace the miraculous. They talk about the healings as they did 2,000 years ago. They talk about the angels as they did 2,000 years ago. They talk about divine intervention as they did 2,000 years ago. Whereas we're kind of stuck. Here, the church is stuck. It just keeps talking about the 2,000-year-old miracles like God isn't doing anything now. He's shooting off the flare gun like crazy. So I'm getting the Phil Collins song. Against all odds, I'm waiting for you to come back.
That really is powerful and speaks to me in an interesting way. Music has always been a very strong and powerful motivator for me. And I've been very open with talking about my own battles with depression and anxiety. And when I was a teenager, almost committing suicide, I put the gun in my mouth, pulled the trigger repeatedly, and I knew the gun was loaded, safety was off, and it would just click. Nothing would happen. And when my dad's headlights panned into the room, I knew I couldn't let him hear that crack and know that he was just a few seconds too late. So I put the gun away and figured I'd do it another time. And I went downstairs and just put on my headphones, sat in the dark with my old stereo on, and just started flipping stations. And I kept hearing a song that I liked at the time. And it was one of those pop songs I'd never paid any attention to the lyrics of. And there I was sitting there feeling so bad about myself, hating everything about me, my life, and where I was. And in that teenage angst of nobody's ever felt like this before. Nobody's ever been in this part of a dark spot before. And I am so alone. And as I'm thinking that, I start hearing, I hate my clothes, my hair, my face. And I stop and I look at the stereo, and it's Bruce Springsteen's Dancing in the Dark. And every time I would spin that dial, I would find that song again at different points in the song through that night for quite a while. And it was very profound to me, because as I'm sitting there feeling this hollow emptiness, this loneliness, I'm realizing that in the words of this pop musician at the time, that I'm not alone. Somebody else has felt this. Somebody else has been through what I've been through. And if he survived this, I can survive this. And those lyrics spoke to me in a way that brought me out of that. And I felt as though, and not trying to canonize a musician, but I felt as though the words of God were being relayed to me. That when I needed to hear a message, literally, it would astound you that how many times I flipped that dial and caught that song. Now, it was the 80s, and it was pop, and it was huge on the radio at that time, but it was like I couldn't switch to a station without finding it. And it kept playing over and over to me. And that pulled me out of a very dark, very scary place and put me back on a path of feeling okay. And and realizing I wasn't alone. And flash forward many years into the future, and I'm driving in my car after having had a couple of miserable days and still dealing with some darkness and depression. And I have my radio on, as I'm always doing when playing music in the background, and have heard this song a million times, but not paying attention to it. And I'm talking in my mind to God saying, you know what? I'm kind of at that point again. I just feel like I'm alone. I don't feel like you're there. I've gone to church. I don't feel you at church. I don't feel you anywhere. I don't feel that there's a connection here. What's going on? Give me any kind of sign. Anything will do. Just let me know that you're there. And the only way I can explain this, Trapper, and I'm sure you understand this as well, talking about what you just discussed, it felt like at that exact second, somebody had been pressing their hands against my ears. So I could hear in the background the music. And as soon as I asked for that sign, it was like somebody removed their hands from my ears. And at that exact second, there's a song, again, a silly pop song, again, from my youth, from the 80s, playing on the radio, but it's right at the point where it just keeps repeating itself. If you're lost and you look, then you will find me. Time after time. And it was a Cyndi Lauper song, and she just kept repeating that one segment. It was this very strange, cold slap in the face that at that exact moment, the scales fell from my ears, and I could hear clearly. And it was at that exact moment that those lines were being repeated. And to me, at that moment, that's all I needed. And that made me feel like something was bigger at play here, because for some reason I was in a dark spot, and that radio was on at that time at that station, and I was looking for some kind of sign. And as soon as I asked for that, that was there. Synchronicity, coinkydink, call it what you will. It put me back into a better mindset, and I felt like I wasn't alone. So I think music has got an amazing ability to heal and bring you out of these places. And I believe that a lot of times that this music is there and is a sign if you pay attention to it. And again, I know there's a lot of people that can say pareidolia and us looking for sense out of anarchy, but those were two of the most powerful experiences in my life.
Sometimes I think we try to put God in a box. It's infinity. Creativity is infinity. I mean, it just goes on and on. What he does through music. The very first day of recording my old Blind Faith Live episodes, the very first day. Remember the podcast is called Blind Faith Live, right? So I'm at Mass, and the Mass begins with, "We walk by faith and not by sight." And I'm doing a Blind Faith Live podcast, and and this is day one of recording, and I'm just going, thank you. I mean, how many signs do you need? My wife is taking pictures of clouds because we kind of use that as a backdrop for the logo, and she takes a bunch of pictures, doesn't pay much attention. Then she looks at them, and there with one of the clouds was this perfectly formed dove, white dove, this white patch in this otherwise kind of grayish, different toned clouds. The Holy Spirit, as far as we were concerned, it was like an okay. It was like, yep, you're on the right path. You look for those things. It's okay to ask for a sign. It's okay. I mean, I'm being blown away here tonight, Dave, by you. I mean, the gun, the dog, the window, the songs. It's very strong. You're very connected. You're obviously very, very connected. And these are very powerful moments. And you too were saved for a divine purpose. You're being called, whether it's to do this show or something else in your life, or whatever it is that he wants you to do, you're doing something. You're doing something. You're on some path that he wants you on. You're in, I call it the bubble. You're in the bubble of knowing what your purpose is. And there are people who go through life never knowing what their purpose is. And all you have to do is ask. I swear, if you don't know what your purpose is, just ask. And then be open. I mean, be open. And when things come in, don't say no, just be open. Think about it for a while. Pray about it for a little while. Because he's going to, if you take a step towards him, he's going to take a step towards you, and you're going to get a hint, a person in your life, a thought. You can see it on a television show. There can be, it's amazing the different places, whether it's a song, at a movie, something somebody says. I was talking to one guy, he said he was so angry at God. He was so angry. And he was saying out loud in his car to God, God, life sucks. Life just sucks. He turns the corner and there's a big billboard that says, life is what you make it. Now for George, who this happened to, he doesn't just discard that. The conversation's going on. I call these conversations. You had a heck of a conversation the night of the music and the gun. That is a heck of a conversation. You were having a conversation. And the night with the dog and all, that is a conversation. Really strong, loud conversations that you can't get out of your head. And you're not supposed to.
How do you justify for people then that, they feel like, all right, then why is he listening so much more to Dave Schrader and making those moments available for him? I've cried out for help myself and I haven't seen those signs. I don't know how to answer people when they bring that to me. The short answer is maybe he has, you just weren't looking for the sign that you were given. And, sometimes it feels like I'm being curt and short and I don't mean it to be. But what's your definition of that? How do you explain that to people?
My answer is it's not a competition. It's not a competition. Dave's experiences are Dave's experiences. Those are yours. But everybody has experiences. Everybody has experiences. And you don't have to be down at the bottom rung to have the experience. Sometimes when you are feeling so close, things happen at all stages, but I think there's an openness. There's a connection that you have that I think you may, perhaps you have to kind of feel like you have to kind of sit on a little bit there, but it's there.
Thanks, Dave. Dave Schrader, wonderful radio host. That program is called Midnight in the Desert. Give you a link to it at episode 23 of Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. Love to encounter with you. You have a story? You have a story. Tell me at touchedbyheaven.net. I'll get back to you. My thanks to those of you who are helping us financially through Patreon. Once again, just go to touchedbyheaven.net. And if you could become a patron, that helps us a lot. And thank you for sharing this. And also, if you like these things, then just go into your app and rate and review. Just by doing that and showing the powers that be that you like it, it makes them share it with more people that might like this as well. So make sure you rate and review this Touched by Heaven podcast. Thank you. I will see you next time on Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I am your host, Trapper Jack.